Okay, well, thank you again, Justin, for being here today. This is what our third webinar together, I believe.
Mhm.
So this is gonna be awesome because you know what? I bet you there's a ton of platforms and tools that you know that
Mhm.
I'm like, I should have thought of this in the first place. Why didn't I? So that can be super helpful.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't really have much to say. It's summertime. I mean, we do have some events going on, but you can always check out our website and Facebook page. Like we have a lunch and learn actually at NIPCA coming up on July 31st with Carolyn Verplogen. So that'll be exciting. And more special events. Haley's actually leading the one after that, which is also exciting. Speed dating. Sweet. So, okay, but Justin, if you want to give a couple bullet points about yourself in case anyone's,
Yeah,
first time getting to know you, feel free and then take it
yeah,
away.
sounds good. I actually have a slide about it, so I'll talk a little more about that. I do want to kind of preface this with anyone that's been to our previous workshops. This one's going to be a little more information heavy, a little less visual, but this is one I've been wanting to do for a long time because I think there's a lot of tools out there that can be really confusing if you're not in the industry or haven't utilized them before. So my real goal here is to kind of give you guys some base information about platforms and even some kind of thrown in abstract concepts that help you understand those platforms even better. So yeah, I'm really excited to do this, and I'm ready to jump in here. And if you guys have any questions, especially because I know there's only a handful of people for this one, definitely ask questions. I don't know that I'll see them immediately, but Nikki can 100% interrupt me because I want to make sure that you guys are really understanding everything that we're talking about. So first things first, to go over who I am. For those of you guys that don't know, my name is Justin Hoffman. I am the owner of Blackbird Digital here in Coeur d'Alene. I've been working professionally in the industry for about 12 years now, but I've been doing marketing pretty much my whole life. It's what I've always focused on. I went to the University of Idaho and I graduated with three bachelor's degrees, one in marketing, one in graphic design, and one in experience design. So I've always kind of had this left and right brain dominant combination that's kind of really lended itself to advertising, especially very well. And I started originally in mechanical engineering, so the data and stuff is for some reason something I enjoy. I started Blackbird in 2020. I was a marketing director for a much larger agency for 5 years before that. And yeah, it's been a heck of a ride. So one thing I really like doing is working with the community and kind of helping groups like the Mamas in Business to elevate themselves to a point where you guys are able to grow the business and get to a point where it makes more sense to have people doing this professionally and full time for you. So the things I want to cover today, one of those kind of outside weird topics that I want to talk about is how a website works. I think that's pretty important to know, especially when we're talking about some of the web development and design tools that are out there. We're going to kind of go over some popular design tools. We're going to talk about some advertising platforms and ways that you can kind of utilize those. One thing I really want to focus on there is like, what are those platforms for and what do they excel at? Pretty much everything we talk about here is something that you guys can very much learn to use yourselves, which is a big reason why they're in here. And I don't really talk about anything here that I wouldn't at least kind of recommend to an extent. Then I want to get into specifically some SEO tools. I know you guys probably hear search engine optimization kind of everywhere in the business world these days because it's pretty important. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about what SEO is, and then also some tools that you guys can use to kind of help benefit yourselves there, and then just kind of some extraneous tools as well. So, jumping right into it, the first thing I want to talk about is how a website works. This is always a little bit confusing, and I wish it was simpler, but frankly, it's just not. There are some companies like Squarespace that are starting to try to simplify this stuff a little bit for people that aren't developers. But bear with me because as somebody who's not a web developer, there's even things here that I don't fully understand. But because of that, I've also learned to explain it in a way that normal people can understand a little better. So the three main pieces of your website that matter are your domain, your hosting server, and not required, but pretty typical is your content management system. So jumping first on the list is your domain. So when you guys see something like google.com, or in our case, this is blackbird.com, your URL, that is your domain. And the best way to think about that is like your street address, right? Like that's how people find your website. It's not the house. Your website is not like our website is not this is blackbird.com. That's just how people access our website. Um, in order to get a domain, you have to go through what's called a registrar, and these are, think of it like the post office. They're the ones that will assign you that domain name. Ones that you've probably heard a lot and or use already. GoDaddy is by far the biggest. Squarespace domains is getting big now, which actually they bought Google domains, which is not something that happens very often. Usually Google's buying other companies, not vice versa. And then another pretty popular one's called Namecheap. That's one that a little more developer heavy. It seems like people that are really in the website industry are the ones that tend to use Namecheap. But just to kind of give you a quick background, like we actually prefer Squarespace domains simply because we've always used Google domains. GoDaddy, questionable morals of a company. But when you're looking for a domain, what's really important, I think, in my opinion, is that it's really easy to spell and easy to type. And that's one thing that people don't think about very often anymore is that, when you are typing with two hands on a keyboard, one thing that happens a lot is people's words will be like all one hand, right? And that lends itself to typos a lot. That makes it harder for people to actually correctly input. And even though URLs are typically linked nowadays, you're still probably handing out business cards and stuff that have your domain on them. So that's just kind of something I like to keep in mind. And the jury's kind of out on whether your domain has SEO value. One thing we'll talk a little more about is that Google doesn't really tell us what actually matters for SEO. It's all stuff that we've learned through trial and error. But one thing I like to recommend is actually using local things. Like if you're a local business, using like plumbing CDA is a great URL because people, one, remember that, and two, it's more associated with the industry and kind of establishes you as the dominant force in the area in that industry. So once you have your domain, you need to set up the next thing, and that's hosting. And this is probably the most confusing of the three aspects. Um, to understand how a website works, it's really just a bunch of files that you are downloading to your computer. Now, those files have to be stored somewhere, right? And that's what a hosting server is. So when somebody goes to thisisblackbird.com, they are connecting to a computer that we pay to have server space on, and then are downloading the files in order to see them on their browser. So it's kind of abstract and confusing, but it's also a little easier to understand if you literally think about it like you're downloading something from Google Drive. We see that like coding where it's like a black screen with all the colored text. That's effectively what you're downloading. And then it just kind of shows through the browser. And browsers that we all use, Google Chrome, Safari is a huge one. Firefox is still pretty big. And then Edge, which used to be Internet Explorer, is another pretty big one. And one thing to keep in mind here is that your servers vary in size. It really depends on who you're using for a hosting company. But typically they'll have a limit on how much storage you can have. And usually it starts around, 10 gigabytes. It seems to be pretty basic. But if you have a bigger website and you have a lot of photos or a lot of video, or even just a lot of traffic, a lot of people accessing that site at the same time, it's important that you have a server that's big enough to accommodate that. Otherwise, you'll end up with your website crashing, you'll end up with really slow load times, or you'll go to, add a picture or something to your website and it just can't upload. So definitely something to keep in account there. There's a lot of ways to do hosting. A lot of local companies like us do it. It's a little more expensive to go locally, but I actually would recommend that just because it's better customer service. It's easier to contact somebody, to an agency or a hosting company here in Coeur d'Alene than it is to, reach out to a giant company like Bluehost or DigiTimber that are a little less responsive because they have thousands of customers and it makes it a little difficult. So once you have that set up, then you get to do the fun part, and that's the part that we all think about, and that's building the actual website, right? And in order to build that website, typically, and this isn't always, we're using what's called a CMS or a content management system. The most typical one that people usually see is WordPress. WordPress is responsible for like 65 to 70% of all websites on the internet. It's by far the most popular. There are still some kind of old school websites where there's a developer that hand codes every little thing and they're literally just uploading that code to the server. But even developers nowadays are, for the most part, trying to use CMSs because it just makes life a lot easier, not only for, the client, but also for themselves. Now, this is the part that you interact with. So when you are going in to add words or pictures or build a new page or upload a blog, something like that, you're probably interacting with a content management system. And a couple that have kind of taken over and not only operate as a CMS, but also handle your hosting and your domain at the same time are like Shopify and Squarespace, even Wix. That's one that I don't love to recommend because I think Squarespace is a better option. But all of these visual builders, as they call them, typically will handle your hosting for you. And that is really nice, especially for small businesses and for people that are managing and building their own website, because you don't have to worry about all the technical end of things. They're just going to kind of take care of it for you, and it's one bill. So that also you don't have to worry about, if your domain expires or your hosting needs to renew. It's just kind of all included in that monthly cost. So, I'm sorry for starting out with something so dense, but I think it's really important to kind of understand these segments of a website in order to understand the rest of digital marketing. Because at the end of the day, even social media to an extent really hinges on your website as part of that digital presence. So now that we kind of have that out of the way, I want to jump into the design and production end of things. Um, there are a lot of tools out there. I mean, literally thousands. There are some that are more complex than others. There's a couple really main ones that I want to talk about here. And one is one that I've already done a workshop on, two workshops actually. The last two workshops were both on Canva. This presentation you're looking at, even I made in Canva. And if you saw on a couple slides ago, I have 2 graphic design degrees. Canva is really awesome. It is fantastic for beginners. It exists pretty much solely to give business owners and people that aren't graphic designers the ability to put out really great content. It was started specifically as a platform to build social media posts, and since then has expanded tons. And this is a program that I really advocate for, and a big reason for that are the templates and the content library. When you're designing things, you have to source, stock photography or icons, or I mean anything that's not specific to your business. You have to go find somewhere, and usually those things cost money. Canva integrates all of that stuff, so we don't have to worry about subscribing.
Question really quick.
Yeah, hit me.
Canva is so great. Is there anything Canva cannot do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest one to keep an eye on is right now logos. We get
Oh,
a lot of people designing logos in Canva.
yeah.
I guess you, in theory, can design a logo in Canva, but for a logo to be functional, it needs to be what's called a vector file. And
Mhm.
a vector file really is just a bunch of math. It's, connecting points in space via a line, and just kind of filling those spaces with color. And it's kind of abstract and hard to explain. But if you need something scalable, that's really important. A vector is infinitely scalable. It can be as small as you need it to be. It can be as big as you need it to be. And when you're in Canva, it only works in what's called bitmap or raster,
Mm-hmm.
which works kind of like a photo or like your TV does. You have pixels in the image, and the more pixels there are, the better quality it is, but you still have a very limited scale, right?
Okay,
So that's the
great.
biggest thing that I would recommend, at least not long term, doing in Canva. There are logo templates. There's good ways to kind of build out something that looks nice in Canva. But at some point, you're definitely going to at least want to hand it over to a designer and have them vectorize that logo just so it's more editable and usable for you.
And that's something Blackbird can do, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's something we do all the time.
Awesome. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
thank
And as
you.
much as I love plugging ourselves here, it's something that really any graphic designer can help with.
Yes.
It's like we have a lot of really talented people in town. Obviously, I would love to help you. That's why we're here. But we're not the only ones that can do that. And I want to make sure that everyone kind of knows that.
Mhm.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. The templates with Canva are another one of my favorite things, especially from a non-designer's perspective. It can be really difficult to put together something even like a flyer, right? Like, how do you lay out that content? What color should you use? You know it needs an image, but what kind of image? And the literally hundreds of thousands of templates that Canva has make that stuff a lot easier, which is another reason that I recommend it. It's also incredibly inexpensive. The paid version of Canva is $12.99. It comes with a bunch of really cool AI tools. You can build out your brand kit to make sure that everything that you do is in your colors and your fonts. It's pretty awesome and well worth the money in my opinion, especially compared to other options. With how powerful Canva is, you'll see on the next slide how much more expensive other options that are harder to use even are. Another thing I really love about Canva and the reason I recommend it is because it has built-in file management. Now what this means is like when you're on your computer and you open up your file explorer, or in Mac, you open up your Finder, and you have all those files that are in there that you can open up. Canva kind of does that itself, and it's really fast and easy to load. So when you um, are needing to organize things, you don't necessarily have to do it on your computer, which is really nice, especially because Canva is entirely cloud-based. And also a couple tools that they've been adding to kind of to keep elaborating on what Nikki was asking is video editing is actually surprisingly powerful in Canva. I mean, you're not going to be able to like produce a film or even necessarily a commercial, but when it comes to like making animations for social media, or what we call kinetic text ads, which are just those little looping videos like you'd see in an Instagram story where it's saying, you know, your services or you have some sort of special or something like that. Canva's really great at that stuff. And again, it has so much stock footage and stock music and things that you can utilize to make life a lot easier there. And then, like I mentioned earlier, they're adding a lot of AI tools. We actually had a workshop about 3 months ago for Mamas in Business that was entirely about Canva's AI tools. And I highly recommend that you watch that one since Nikki has the recordings, because there's a lot you can learn there, and a lot of ways that kind of uh, you can use Canva to make your life just a lot easier moving forward, even more than just using what we call vanilla Canva without all of those additions. Now, the counterpart to Canva, right? Who is Canva replacing? And there's one brand that I think most people have probably heard of, even if they're not designers, but it's Adobe. Adobe is the company that makes most of the industry standard creative softwares. When I went to school, I was there for 7 years, and 5 years of it was learning Adobe and the various facets of it. It's very much intended for professionals or hobbyists. In my opinion, it's actually overly complicated in a lot of ways. But it's really, really powerful, and it does everything. And that's not to say that you guys can't learn how to use Adobe. And actually, if design something you're interested in, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of services like Skillshare out there that can really teach you how to at least use the basics of it to help you put things together, like simple documents, or even edit photos that you may have taken even on your phone of a job site or something. And some of the tools that are part of what we call the Creative Suite, or now it's Creative Cloud CC. The big players there are Photoshop, the one that everyone's probably heard of. That's intended for photo manipulation. So if you take a photo and you need to edit something in or out, or you are making a bunch of photos compiled into one image, that's really where Photoshop excels. I will say it's probably the most flexible of the softwares, but because of that, people tend to use Photoshop for things it's not really intended for, which can cause some issues down the road. But it is a powerful software, and if there's one here for you to learn, I would say it's one of those top three, and Photoshop's definitely a front runner there. The second one that I use primarily, so when I'm not using Canva, which like I mentioned, I do actually use Canva pretty often, is Illustrator. And this is the one that works entirely in vector, just like Nikki asked. These really are to be made. The reason you make um, really anything in industry, the more I think about it, like it's a pretty awesome software, is because the files are really small. You can edit just about anything, including text. So like say, if when I'm making a logo and I find a really nice font that I want to use, but it's not quite right, I don't love the shape of the A or something like that, I can manipulate all that stuff in Illustrator. And that's really what makes it powerful. It is kind of the standard for most designers because it is something that we can do all of the branding. We can even do some small documents. Like I'll make business cards in Illustrator. It's not necessarily what Adobe themselves recommend. That's something that's really more suited for InDesign. But if you're not dealing with a lot of text, Illustrator can handle it really well, and it's a little bit easier to make those little tweaks to designs. And then, as I mentioned, InDesign, it's meant for documents. Anytime I do anything that's a full page or more, if it has more than a paragraph or so of content, I'm probably doing it in InDesign. Um, Pretty much every newspaper or magazine you've ever read was made in InDesign. Premiere Pro is one of the biggest video editing softwares on the planet. It's also probably the one that has the most competition outside of Adobe. There's one called DaVinci Resolve that does a lot of video editing as well. Premiere is one that I would probably stay away from unless you really want to put some time in and learn some a really powerful tool there. But it can get pretty complicated. And then another awesome one is called Lightroom, and this is one where you can edit photos in bulk. So say even if you're using a DSLR or your cell phone, you go out and you take a bunch of photos of a job site or of your office or something, and you want to make sure they all look the same. You can upload them into Lightroom. You can create editing actions. You can get the colors right on one that you like and then apply that to every single one of the photos. Pretty much every photographer uses Lightroom to do the majority of their editing. And then with that, there's a lot more tools to Adobe. There's like 36 programs that they offer. They all have very specific specialties. Like there's some for creating text animations. There's some for creating illustrated animations. They used to have one called Dreamweaver that was made for websites. I mean, there's just tons and tons of Adobe tools. But one thing I really like, and the reason I actually do bring this up here is because they're starting to create simpler tools as well. And they're also starting to implement AI. Now, the simpler tools, the big one is called Adobe Firefly. Um, you can tell Adobe's basically trying to kind of snap back at Canva there a little bit with Firefly, but it's pretty awesome. And it does some good AI as well. You can generate some really nice images with Photoshop. If you have like a photo of something and you want to remove something, you can use AI to remove that and fill it with um, content that actually fits the image, which is really cool. Like I can Photoshop a pole out of a photo with literally just the click of a mouse now. And that's something that you used to have to sit there and paint one pixel at a time to get it just right. And it took a lot of artistry. So Adobe's definitely something to look into. If it's something that you feel like you might enjoy, it's worth trying out, but also knowing that it can be a little bit overwhelming to start. So if it is something that you want to try, don't let yourself be too intimidated by it, and just kind of get in there and play with it. The biggest downside to Adobe is that it's pretty expensive. Like the business license for a normal like single entity business, like what you guys would have, is I believe it's $60 a year or $60 a month. The one that we have for commercial use, where we have tons of clients, it's we get two people can use it, and it's like $400 a month, so it can get pretty expensive. But if you're using it for your own business, it's not horrible. And there are some ways to get it cheaper too. They offer different packages that only include like Photoshop, Lightroom, and InDesign, which might be all you need. And there's no reason to pay for the entire suite. So once you have everything designed, right, how do you advertise it? And there's a lot of different kinds of advertising on the internet, but I'm going to focus on a few that I think are the most useful and the most user-friendly ones that I think every single one of you guys can click into, give it a shot, and learn something about or learn how to run a successful campaign. And the first one that if you've been a client of mine or you've been in a meeting with me, one that we beat into the ground is Google Ads, and there's a reason for it. Google Ads are basically the topmost software on what's called pay-per-click. Now it's called pay-per-click because you run your ad and you're not paying to deliver your ad to people when they search. You're paying when they click on that ad and typically go to your website is the goal for those ads. So that makes it a little more affordable. It's a little more complicated. Like they try to present it as super simple as far as the billing goes, but it's a little more complicated than that. But at the end of the day, like that's when you're paying is when somebody clicks on your ad. So in theory, you're not paying unless you're getting something. It is one of the cheaper digital platforms, and the reason for that is because it is done in mass. I don't even know how much money Google makes off of Google Ads, but I know it's in the trillions of dollars per year. There are companies that spend several $1 million just on Google Ads every single year. And that's because it's incredibly powerful. And the reason I like to recommend it off the bat most of the time, now not every case, but most of the time, is because the users are further down what we call the sales funnel, right? They are closer to conversion or buying than really any other platform. These are people that are actively looking for whatever service you offer. So, like for me, we sometimes run ads centered around marketing or website development, right? And I know that whenever I'm delivering that ad to somebody, it's because they are actively looking for a local web designer, right? So they're the most valuable leads. They tend to have the highest conversion rate. Conversion rate is is the number of people that actually act on what you're asking them to do. And the reason we use the term conversion is because it can kind of be whatever you want. Typically, it's going to be giving you money in one way or another, whether it's scheduling an appointment, buying a product. But you can set your conversion to be, I just want people to read my blog. I want someone to spend 10 minutes on my website. That's a totally decent conversion if that fits your personal strategy and what you want to do with your business. The targeting for Google Ads is based on keywords and individual user habits, which I know we think a lot about like data. We think about Facebook and how Facebook knows everything that we're interested in, right? Now, there is some interest-based targeting in Google Ads, but typically you are bidding on individual keywords. So web design or web development, and you can get even more specific with that and say, web development CDA, and I want people to be delivered the ad only when they search exactly that. And that's totally doable there. You can do habits. And what I mean by habits, it's how do people typically interact with the internet, right? Some people really love video ads. Some people really love search results. Some people will click on an ad and it takes them a week to make a decision. That's the kind of information that Google is tracking from you guys, not so much the stuff that you are looking for, if that makes sense. So keep that in mind. Um, whenever you're trying to put together some targeting with Google Ads, you really want to make sure that you are remembering that Google's going to use a lot of machine learning to kind of figure out who is going to interact with your ad the best, not just if it's a relevant ad. Now, Google Ads can be a little bit intimidating, kind of like Adobe. Now, one thing that they've done recently is implement what's called smart mode. And smart campaigns are designed specifically for business owners to run their own ads. It's really straightforward. Like there's a nice little wizard that walks you through step by step everything you need to do. Upload your logo. What industry are you in? What kinds of clients are you looking for? And it will use AI to kind of determine, what ads to deliver to who and how much and how often. And it does most of the work for you. And it's not quite as powerful as expert mode. Like a really well optimized expert campaign will definitely outperform a really well optimized smart campaign. But on the flip side, a really badly put together expert mode will just cost you money. It's just going to bleed money. Whereas even a really basic smart campaign that somebody that's never built a Google ad before does will definitely outperform that because Google kind of takes the reins. So this is one platform that I want to encourage businesses, even though this is the bread and butter service of ours, I want to encourage business owners to give it a shot. You don't have to have a huge budget for Google Ads. You can spend, 100 or 200 bucks a month, and get some decent results. It depends on your industry. If you're a lawyer, you're gonna have a little harder time getting results for cheap because they make a lot of money off of a sale, so they are willing to pay a lot more, and it's all competitor based. It operates on an auction. Like it kind of think about it like eBay, where you and your competitors are saying, I'm willing to pay, 15 cents if somebody clicks on my ad. And somebody else comes around and says, well, I'm willing to pay 18 cents if somebody clicks on my ad. And Google's going to kind of, skew towards the person that's willing to pay more typically. So if you're in a really competitive field where people are just dumping money into it, Google Ads can be tough, and that's why I say it's not always what I recommend. But a lot of times it is because really you're kind of picking that low-hanging fruit. That's the best bang for your buck. It's probably the most traffic that you'll get of any ad platform. And it's one of the most powerful, most ubiquitous that I think applies to just about any company. I would say 9 out of 10 companies that walk through our doors are great Google Ads candidates. So you built some Google Ads or you're interested in doing that, what's next? Um, Google just launched a thing called local service ads. And the reason I have this listed separate is because it is actually a separate platform. I'm not entirely sure why they do it that way. But right now it's in beta. And when anything's in beta with Google, they are throwing money at it and they want you guys to use it. And right now they're basically giving away leads with local service ads. The catch there is that it's only open to really limited industries. I want to say there's like 36 right now that work. Most of the trades, most service-based companies will be allowed unless you're an outlier, like if you're servicing hot tubs. Like I doubt that that's a service category that's allowed, but if you're tree care service or a plumber or a home builder or even restaurants are definitely included in that. This is a great option, and the cool thing about them is that instead of paying per click PPC before, now we're paying per lead. And Google's the one collecting those leads. So when someone interacts with a local service ad, yes, Nikki?
I don't want to like interrupt. I'm trying not to.
You're okay.
Well, I was just gonna say, so we tried it and we're
Mhm,
putting on pause because the paper lead was just so expensive.
mhm,
But my question actually is because we went through that process, we had to, get our contractor's license number and all
mhm.
that for the Google guarantee. Is that also go to your Google ads as well, like aside from LSA?
Um, in the future it will. So your entire account is technically Google guaranteed, or now Google verified is the term that they use more often. Um, I keep saying Google, my phone's getting confused. Uh,
Yeah.
um, but right now it's really only relevant for the local service ads, and that's kind of how they're pushing that ad category. In some, just like normal Google ads, in some service industries like tree service, because typically those are pretty high dollar services that are being
Hmm.
provided, it can be a bit expensive. The hope is that they're closing a lot easier. It's not always the case, but it's definitely worth trying
Yeah.
out. And I definitely recommend anybody that qualifies for local service ads at least gives it a shot for a couple months.
Yeah, and I think that yeah, it's probably industry based, and we'll
Yeah,
we'll try it again, but we're just
for
like
sure.
let's just pause it right now since we have so much to focus on. So,
Totally.
but
Yep.
yeah, definitely
Yeah.
worth a try.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good platform, and a big reason why it's been so cheap in the past is because Google just wants people using it. And they've started opening it to more industries. I'd say every 2 months or so we get another 10 industries added to the grouping that's allowed. And as that happens, they'll slowly start raising their prices. And then once the new ad type comes out, that one will be really cheap. That's just kind of staying ahead of that curve is kind of important. It's not something I expect normal people to really keep updated on. But it's definitely something that if you're interested in signing up for the Google newsletter or something, they'll keep you in the loop of what is new and trending. And typically the newer it is, the cheaper it'll be. Um, so the interesting thing about this is that it's actually based on your Google business profile. So you set your industry category and it pulls all the information and services from your Google page, which is a big reason why it makes it a little simpler. And this is another one, again, that I think business owners can even more so than regular Google ads run on their own because it does most of the work for you. There's really not a lot to do. And it records calls. So when somebody clicks on it and phone calls you, one, you'll get an alert on your end. I think it says like, this is a call from Google local service ads, and then it'll patch the person through. But it's also recording that phone call. So you can go to your local service ads profile and go back and listen and see, what closed, what didn't. It's pretty nifty in that sense because that's a service that a few companies do, but it can be really expensive. And granted, this only does it for people that are calling from the local service ads, but it's definitely nice to see, especially if you have somebody else doing your sales. Like for me, it's really powerful when we're running local service ads, or even if the client's running them, I want access because I can then kind of go in and spy. I can listen to the phone calls and know like, maybe the salesperson is missing an opportunity here, or, maybe the call that they're getting is just a really, really trash lead. And I'm able to kind of find that out based on listening to those phone calls, which is kind of cool. Now the big thing here, like Nikki mentioned, is the Google guarantee or the Google verified listing. It's an application process to be a part of local service ads. Anyone can go and just make Google ads, normal Google ads, but with local service ads, you have to apply and you have to give them information. You have to have a certain number of reviews. They'll want your proof of insurance. They'll want your business license. It's a little bit different for every industry. If you're a lawyer, they'll be doing really extensive background checks, making sure you pass the bar, stuff like that. And once that's approved, which sometimes only takes a couple days, I've seen it take up to 3 weeks or so. But once that's approved, then you can pretty much immediately start running ads. And that little green check mark here that you can see on the screen is weirdly powerful. People love it. And what a lot of even users don't know is that that's actually kind of an insurance policy. So if somebody's really unhappy with a business's service, they can that they got through a Google verified listing, they can take that to Google and Google will refund them up to $2,000 of that service that was provided. So Google wants to make sure that the people that are Google guaranteed are actually worth guaranteeing. So because of that, you have a pretty good user-facing experience there. Another big one here, we talk a lot about Facebook and Instagram ads, Meta Business Manager. Now, this is actually a tool that's separate from Facebook, and I think a lot of people don't know that. And it does a lot more than just run ads. This is how you manage pages. And if you are a business that has multiple people that need access to your Facebook page or your Instagram page, I highly recommend doing it through Meta Business Suite, which is just business.facebook.com. Connect everything through there. It makes it so you as the owner can boot people off if they leave. You can add people easily. You can give them different, more specific roles within the company. You can partner with an agency like us. We'll get access through Meta Business Manager with our clients. It's a pretty awesome tool that, frankly, Facebook doesn't tell a lot of people about, and it's really important. In there too, you can also build your own custom audiences. You can schedule posts out. So there's a lot of softwares, which unfortunately I cut from this because I know I'm trying to get through a lot of information in an hour. But Meta Business Manager can do a lot of the lightweight scheduling of posts. And so can Canva actually. Now within that, we have Meta Ads Manager. The reason I'm talking about this specifically is because I want to talk about what that audience is like, right? They're kind of the polar opposite of Google Ads. Google Ads are people ready to buy. Meta Ads are people that are potential clients, right? So because of that, it can be a little more expensive, but it can also be extremely powerful, especially depending on what industry you're in. Now, what you need to do there is remember that you're advertising to people that don't want ads. We're on Facebook to interact with friends or see memes or whatever people are on there for. So you need to show them the ad. You need to find the right person to deliver the ad. You need to entice them with the ad. You need to explain who you are and how they can convert. And then you got to convince them to convert. That's a lot of steps. And because of that, it can be a little expensive. You have to have pretty good creative to do well. And by creative, I mean those image assets or videos that you're running as part of the ad. But because of that, it can reach a very different style of audience. And if you're a product or service that people may not know about, people aren't searching for, especially startups and like anybody that's got a product that is not like something that people are actively seeking out. This is a great place to do it. Even with trades companies, something that I typically recommend running on Facebook is just a really killer promo. If you're offering a discount or you have a really cool subscription service or something, it's a great place to do it is through Meta. Just knowing that you want to be pretty specific with what you're advertising on Facebook and Instagram, because you can also bleed quite a bit of money pretty quickly. But one thing I really like about it is that, again, really every Facebook and Instagram ad is pretty simple. Like they do a good job walking you through how to build the ad, which is always what I'm looking for when I'm recommending these kinds of tools to clients. Some other ones to look into. I don't want to get too deep into them again, just because there's a lot of content here. Internet radio is more powerful than people think. Things like Spotify, Pandora, even Apple Music can do ads now. They're pretty cheap. That's a big reason I like them. And kind of think about it like as people used to run, I guess people still do run ads on the actual radio, the FM radio. This is the same deal, except there's a lot more people on it and a lot younger audience typically too. So if you're, trying to reach millennials and Gen Z and even Gen Alpha, Spotify is a good place for that. Pinterest does great. TikTok is obviously the one that's growing. Um, TikTok can be a little bit tough though, because again, you need really good creative, but with TikTok, you have to have video content, and that can be kind of expensive to produce. Reddit is a good place if you are in a really niche market. I find a lot of um, good results through Reddit, especially with products. LinkedIn, if you are selling to other businesses, LinkedIn's king. It's basically the only place that you can pretty well guarantee the people you are advertising to are professionals. Etsy and Amazon, if you're e-commerce and you're selling a product, great places to run ads. With Etsy, they're opening to not just crafts now too. So even if you do sell a normal product, you can put it on Etsy. And some of those ads are great because there are a staggering amount of people that just browse Etsy for fun. And you can definitely get some traction there. So the next and kind of the last huge topic I want to talk about is SEO, or search engine optimization. So first, I'm going to kind of go through what that is. Then I'm going to talk about tools. We have about 20 minutes, so definitely let me know if you have any questions, and I'm going to try to make sure we have some extra time, even if I have to run over a little bit. So what is SEO? You guys hear it all the time. It's very annoying, I'm sure, because it's very abstract and nobody can really explain it very well. Imagine that your business's website is a book in a library, right? How do you attract people to that book? You want someone to pick it up off the shelf, right? It needs to be in the right spot and organized well. It's got to be accessible. It's got to have the content that the person's looking for when they're, going through the library system to find what book they want to check out. That's basically what it is, except the library is Google and the book is your website. There are a lot of things that affect SEO and your rankings in search results. The biggest ones that I want to talk about with you guys, because again, this is a never-ending process. There are lots of people, including our guy Mason, who only do SEO. That's their entire job because it can be that complicated. But there's a lot of things that you can do, especially locally, to do well. And one of the big things is focusing on your website content. And by that, I mean the images and the words on your website, right? The organization of that information, making sure that you have, good pages with good content, and those pages are broken up in a way that makes sense, not just for you, but for the user that's trying to access your website. Services are one of the biggest ones that come to mind there. Keywords. So you want to make sure that you are using keywords on your website in the actual written content that you want to rank for. And that's probably the thing that people know the most about with SEO. And then the other thing is what's called metadata. This is kind of a scary word, but it's actually pretty simple. This is just the information that we put on our website that Google sees outside of the written content. So, like when you search on Google and you see that result come up with the purple headline link and it has the little black words underneath it that kind of tell you what that page is about, that's your meta title and meta description. Those are pretty integral to having good SEO quality. And even just doing those, like literally just having meta titles and meta descriptions, can put you miles above the competition, especially in a place like North Idaho, where people frankly don't take this stuff very seriously for the most part. And there's also what's called, the other big one that we talk about a lot is called an alt tag, which is actually the back end kind of description of every image on your website. That kind of serves two purposes. One is to rank on Google Images, which is surprisingly important. And also for people that need a screen reader, or for Google to be able to know what's inside an image, right? If I'm blind and I'm trying to access your website, you can have the most beautiful photography in the world, but that's not helping me, right? I need it to be explained to me, and that's what alt tags are for primarily. But then also Google reads that content to know what's inside the image as well, which can also help your rankings. Another one, consistency of information. I don't mean just on your website, but across all platforms. It's important that your Facebook and your Instagram and your Google page and your website all have, the same phone number, the same email, the same address, the business name. Like that stuff all matters, and Google cross-references everything now, and every day they're finding new platforms to cross-reference. So making sure that that stuff is all accurate is really important. Your website analytics affect it, and by that I mean how many users you're getting, how long they're spending there, how often people are filling out forms on your website, new users versus existing users. That stuff all matters, and Google knows if your website's getting a ton of traffic and people are spending 20 minutes on your website's probably got good relevant information, right? So it's going to deliver your website more often. And then another big one is consistency of updates. So this really just means that you are adding things to your website consistently. Your website is a living document. It shouldn't be stagnant. I try to encourage our clients, even if it's just changing the title and the hero, that big, the first thing that you see on your website, try to do that once a month or once every couple months. Because when Google sees that your website's being updated, it knows that you care, it knows that you're putting effort into it. And that's really important. It rewards you for simply trying in a lot of ways, which is really nice. I used to tell a lot of our clients that Google's kind of the teacher, and you want to be the teacher's pet that brings in an apple and puts it on its desk every morning. It doesn't matter um, necessarily what your intentions are, but you gotta appease Google. They have stupid rules, and we need to make sure we follow them. So put that apple on its desk every morning. Now, with SEO, there are a lot of pretty powerful tools, really important ones. The one that I think everybody here, everyone that has a website should have Google Analytics set up. Now, that's another part of the Google suite, analytics.google.com. From there, you put a little tracking code on your website. Most every platform like Squarespace and Wix has a place for you to do it. You can just Google how to do it real quick, and there'll be pretty explicit instructions. And if you're not able to figure it out, really any marketing agency or marketer can help you out with that. And what that's for is tracking that user information. So that's where you'll find out how long people are spending on your website, how many people land on the website and then immediately leave, stuff like that. That's what Google Analytics is for. It also connects with Google Ads. So we're getting a little more technical here, but if you are, trying to create custom conversion goals on your website, you track all that stuff through Google Analytics, and it tells Google Ads what's happening on your website so that Google Ads can adjust its ads. Another big one is Google Search Console. So Search Console is kind of the extension of how Google crawls your website. And by crawl, I mean literally a robot goes and reads your website, relatively often, probably about once or twice a month. Your website's being read by Google to some extent. And to be registered on Google Search Console, you submit your sitemap, is what it's called. It's literally just a written document, which it'll explain how to do. That tells Google the layout of your website. And more than anything, what that's doing is helping Google with efficiency of crawling your website because it doesn't have to go and click every link on your website to find what it's looking for. But again, it's also just telling Google, hey, I care about SEO. I want you to crawl my website more often. And it will. And that alone can help your SEO value. And then as far as analytics go, there are more softwares that are separate from Google. Some really popular ones are Moz and SEMrush are probably the two biggest. And those are for tracking your ranking information. So not so much your users. We're not looking at how many people are visiting your website necessarily there, but we're tracking what keywords you're ranking for, what your competitors are ranking for, and ways that you can improve your website. And one thing I really like about these platforms is that they're unbiased. Google definitely shows us the information that it wants us to see. So that's one downside to using stuff like Google Analytics, even though it's kind of required. So this is a good place to kind of get even a second opinion, so to speak, about your website. They can be a little on the spendy side. I think a Moz just solo license is like $8 or $9 a month, so it's not terrible, but it's definitely an expense to think about. It's going to cost you a couple $100 a year, but that can be really good information and tell you, what keywords are you ranking for and how can you improve those rankings. And now if you take one thing from this speech or from this workshop, this is maybe the most important. Google Business, your page on Google Maps. You'll see on the right side here, I have a screenshot of Blackbird's Google Maps. I took the screenshot a few nights ago, so we were closed when it happened. So that's why it says closed. But this is the phone book. People talk about the internet being the new phone book, and that's where people go to find businesses. This is the place. This is the most important platform for any business to be on that is location based. So what's really important here is that it's well optimized, right? You want to make sure you're showing up to the right people at the right times. And a few ways that you can do that and things to keep an eye on are your about section, your services, all the information here. Like you can see our phone number, our website. We even have a chat set up, and here's our listed services. Make sure that stuff's accurate and make sure it's reflecting, again, some of those keywords that you want to rank for, things that are important for you. Another thing that's really important is soliciting reviews. You want people to review your page. I'll be honest with you, we only have 16 reviews. That keeps me up at night. I want a lot more reviews. So make sure you're asking your clients, whether you're doing it automated or whether you're just reaching out yourself, ask for reviews. And then also, once they review, make sure you reply to that review. Google wants to see it within 24 hours. Late is better than never. But make sure you're replying to those reviews because, again, Google wants to see activity, wants to see that you're using your Google business page. And to that same point, they also have this kind of social media aspect to it where you can post on your Google business page. And I recommend doing that, once a month, maybe twice a month if you can. And even just recycle a post from Facebook or something is totally fine. Just keep in mind the people that are seeing it. This isn't necessarily a social media platform. So just kind of make sure you're kind of thinking about the content that you're posting there, that it's going to be relevant to people. But again, Google just wants to see that you're doing stuff. Um, and then another reason that this stuff is important is because Google Ads links with this. Again, just like we saw with local service ads, um, the information on this page really, really influences your total ads. If your Google My Business page is ranking really, really well, Google will favor your ads on Google Ads, even if you're paying less than somebody else. And to that same point, it also really affects your SEO value. And this is kind of the base hub when I talk about all these different platforms and having consistent information. This is kind of what Google classifies as the Bible of your business, right? This is the correct information, and it wants to make sure that every other platform matches Google Business. And then quickly, I just want to go over some more tools that are kind of separate from these main categories we talked about. There's things that you can take a look at. I'm going to kind of zoom through these because they're not quite as important, and because I want to have a couple of minutes for questions here. One thing you hear a lot about is a CRM, a customer relationship manager. Really what this is for is tracking sales. A lot of you guys in the service industry are probably using something like Service Titan or House Call Pro. That is a CRM, a very powerful CRM that does a lot of other things as well. Some other common ones that we see are HubSpot, Salesforce, Zoho. I use Salesforce. I like it a lot. It's a bit on the expensive side, but it does everything I need and more. I think even if you are a very small business and don't want to pay for a CRM, even using a Google Doc is something. Make sure you're tracking your sales, your customers, where they're at in the funnel. When was the last time you talked to them? That information is really helpful and will help you gain a lot of clarity on your business and where you're at as far as your growth. Another software that can be really helpful, the tasking software. Now by tasking, these are really intended, like, quite literally, just to keep an eye on tasks that are happening inside your business, tracking your time and your employees' time, giving responsibilities to different employees, and kind of assigning those tasks to them, and then being able to know where it's at. The screenshot over here is from one called Monday, which I have listed down here. And you can see that, for this month, they have these 4 main tasks. They have people assigned to them, and you can see the status of where they're at and how long it's going to take. That stuff is important. That can help a lot, even just for managing internal office tasks. And we use ClickUp at Blackbird. ClickUp has a free version that's pretty solid. I highly recommend playing around with it. These can be a little daunting, not because they're complicated, but because there's a lot to them. But I definitely recommend taking a shot and looking at them. And then one that I really wanted to specify here is called Motion. This is a very, very new player to the game, and it uses AI actually to help you prioritize your tasks. So when you assign a task to yourself, it will learn how fast you are, how accurate your forecasting is as far as like how long you think something's going to take you. It links with your Google Calendar, so it can look at what else you have going on. It'll even learn things like you're traveling and stuff like that, and it will prioritize tasks for you. You'll see throughout the day that it'll reshuffle things based on, I need to get this thing done tomorrow, but it's going to take me 4 hours, so it's going to break it into 2 tasks so that way you can get it done in time. It's a very, very powerful tool. Highly recommend. There are a couple different packages for it. The single person one, I want to say, is like $6 or $8 per month. Definitely worth messing around with. I will say it doesn't do quite as good of a job with a whole team. I use it for myself, and Brian, our web developer, uses it for himself. But we use ClickUp for managing the actual business tasks that our account manager, Olivia, keeps an eye on. So last thing here, how do you implement this stuff? The first thing that I always see is that, it's a bit daunting. There's a lot to it, but it's eating an elephant. You can't, if you look at an elephant and know you got to eat it, you can't take one bite and eat the whole thing, but you can take one bite at a time. Prioritize where you feel like you need the most help and try it out. If you feel like a CRM is something that could really help you, or you feel like you need more business and Google Ads might be a good option for you, jump into it, spend a little bit of time. You'll grasp it quicker than you think. And after a while, you'll kind of learn what things can you handle, what things should you hire somebody to help with. Do you even need to do everything? It's very personal and really depends on you and your business. And the only way to know is to experiment and try things out. Um, I like to prioritize the harder things first. Things like a CRM or a tasking software. Those things are tough to make, right? But because of that, they're really important. And the longer you wait into your business, the harder they are to implement. If you are, a family-owned business and you need a CRM, I would start now, even though it may not be super important because you have a great handle on everything on sticky notes on your desk. But as you grow, that's not going to work anymore. And it's really difficult to implement stuff like that and create habits after you've already grown to a point that it's necessary. And then last piece of advice, just don't be scared. Nothing here is going to kill you. A few of these platforms cost a little bit of money. But as long as you're smart about what you're spending and you're not throwing, $5,000 at your Google ads, you'll be okay, and you'll find out in a couple months if it's necessary for you or if you can make it work on your own. Just don't be scared and give it a shot. So then, got a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, so Chelsea, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the box. I will say so, Chelsea, her husband owns a construction company, contracting company. So I will say that we use House Call Pro, and also Kelsey with North Idaho Garage Doors. They use House Call Pro. It's really great
Yep.
for the blue collar industry, I'll say. I we used to use Thrive, and that wasn't as great as House Call Pro, and so I'm glad that we switched to that. And so, like, not being afraid, like if something's not working out, it's really important that you get something that works for you guys.
Yep.
But for the other, industries, I know you have to do the permanent jewelry as well, Chelsea. You probably want to like search around for that, what might work best. But yeah, that was really great information, Justin. You're always super knowledgeable. I definitely have some things I'm going to be implementing, especially it reminds me of sorry, crazy kids in the back, feral children, about the task programs. And I used to use that in my career when I was back in California. And I forget how helpful those can be with projects. So it's super good to know. Yeah, and then like to go off of the Wix, we worked with Justin, and we learned that like Wix is actually a little bit harder than I remembered on implementing. So it's not the worst software in the world, but definitely look at your options if you can. And like Justin, you say you love Squarespace. So definitely compare the different platforms is what
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
But
Squarespace definitely limits you more than Wix does.
yeah.
But sometimes that can be a benefit, right? It's really hard to break your website when Squarespace literally won't let you.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
Mom
that's
is a business. We use brilliantdirectories.com, but that's made for like companies with memberships,
yeah.
right? That is a different kind of I guess service. So yeah, I really appreciate all this information, Justin. Thank you. But Chelsea, do you have any questions? Okay. Oh, no worries. Sounds good. Well, thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, Justin. And we'll connect to see what the next hot topic is. And of course, if anyone watching this video, if you have any specific topics for, digital marketing, advertising, let me know and I'll connect with Justin on it. But is there any parting
Absolutely.
words, Justin, that you have?
No, just have fun, enjoy these things, experiment a little bit. If you guys
Mhm.
have any questions, please reach out to me. My information is pretty much everywhere. So is Blackbird's information as a business, and we are in Your Mama's in Business Facebook
Mhm.
group and stuff as well. So you can reach out to us anywhere, and advice is always free. We'll get you taken care of.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.